Hello, this is Teresa McDowell, and this is a video about zero tolerance policies and practices as pertaining to school districts. This is an important topic we need to cover because as teachers and leaders, educational leaders, we are charged with providing a safe environment for children to learn in, but also we need to keep their rights in the foremost of our thoughts and protect those, and keep in mind at all times what is best for that student. The main points to cover are the importance of this policy and the background for it, the reasonings for it, important court cases and their findings, why we need this policy, problems with implementing zero tolerance policies, and the ISSLC standards. Creating and maintaining a safe environment for students is one of the three basic legal duties that educators are charged with. We are charged with to instruct, to supervise, and, like I said, provide for their safety. In 1990, Congress enacted the first Gun-Free School Zone Act. This was in relationship to rising incidences of school shootings. And so this law made it illegal to possess a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school campus. For normal citizens, they were charged with a felony. For students, they were reported to law enforcement, and they would receive an automatic expulsion for 1 year. And this was dealt out by the school board, not by the administration. It is important to note that students with any disabilities under IDEA could only be expelled for 45 days under this initial law. The Gun-Free School Zone Act was modified in 1995. It now was changed to allow school boards to modify the expulsion for any firearm violation on a case-by-case basis. This provided administrations more flexibility in dealing with misbehavior. This was implemented because principals under the zero policy had begun to suspend and expel students for minor offenses instead of the major offenses that it was written for. Some of the minor offenses students were being expelled for included nail files, paper clips, cough drops, a 5-inch plastic axe as part of a Halloween costume, asthma inhalers, and even a kitchen knife. An important court case is United States versus Lopez. Lopez was a student in Texas who brought a gun to school and was immediately expelled and charged with a crime under the new law. And this was appealed and went to the Supreme Court, actually. And the problem was this precedent then takes significance in that how far is the government going to go to limit private conduct and also the state's rules. An example of a student who took it to court because of the trivial nature of the offense was the student was expelled for a kitchen knife, even a plastic knife in the glove box, and was unaware of it. This was Steele versus Morgan, and this courts did rule in favor of the student in this case for failure of due process being followed. The First Amendment rights are often charges brought against the school district for expulsion due to the zero tolerance policy. In Lowell versus Poway, United School District, the courts found that a reasonable speaker standard is determined if the student is posing a threat or not. Would a reasonable person expect this to be a threat? Because we know teenagers often just spout off without saying anything. In Goss v. Lopez, the courts found that the higher the penalty, because under zero tolerance policy, schools can expel them permanently. So that would be definitely a higher penalty than a 10-day expulsion. The higher the penalty, the higher the need for procedural due process. The school needs to be very careful to honor all the students' property rights. In Blumenthal and Nilsson, this established a reasonable cause as opposed to a probable cause standard. This case involved drugs, and it was this case that caused the schools to get the right to do mandatory random drug testing. The Cary versus Maine School District emphasized the due process rights being followed to the extreme because of the heightened awareness of the rights of children with disabilities. Mr. Carey adopted this child as a 4-year-old, and this child had severe emotional disturbances. They do pay a higher price when they are expelled from school than the regular student body. So the court did find that a minimum of these need to be followed. The student must be advised of the charges. They must be informed of all the evidence against them. They must be given the opportunity to be heard in their own defense. They must not be punished except with substantial evidence. The student must be permitted the assistance of a lawyer in a major disciplinary hearing, which can really present difficulties for a school district. The student must be permitted to confront and cross-examine witnesses, which can also be interesting for a school district. And the student has the right to an impartial hearing. Frequently, the hearing officer is the school superintendent, so this does have far-reaching ramifications for a school district. The Gun-Free School Act required all school districts to implement this zero-tolerance policy, and all 50 states have enacted that and are following that. It was supposed to be a neutral policy, that all incidences of violence, children with weapons in school were to be punished the same. However, it's not applied that way. It's applied disproportionately to students of color and low SES backgrounds. There are both positive and negative results. We have seen the research that there are reduced weapons and there is reduced violence in schools, but there are increased legal referrals. The punishment is no longer being handled by the schools. It's being turned over to the police and the courts. It's important to note that the American Bar Association is opposing zero tolerance policy because they are seeing this discriminatory effect against people of color, minorities, low SES people. They do disagree that there's a mandatory punishment of at least 1 year expulsion if found with a weapon, without regard to the circumstances or the intent of the person. They don't take into account the student's history. Maybe this is the first time they've ever had a problem. This one-size-fits-all, one strike you're out policy violates students' due process rights. And the ABA urges schools to maintain prevention policies instead of just punishment policies, and to ensure that students' rights are protected when they're disciplined. Schools do need this prevention policy, the zero tolerance policy of some sort, because 78% of public schools do experience violence, as seen in the quotation of 2005-2006 data. We need proactive policies to reduce school violence instead of reactive policies. We need to ensure fair punishment. We need to reinstitute schools as a safe place. That is part of the ISSLC Standards. Schools are required to be safe. And a safe environment promotes student learning. It helps teach students proper behavior for adulthood and good citizenship. While by and far most administrators do use common sense when implementing zero tolerance, when the zero tolerance policies were first enacted, administrators weren't given any leeway, and so there was a lot of damage done. Some examples where they failed to take into account the student's intention, they failed to take into account long-term damage, such as if you are expelled for even 3 days, sometimes you are disallowed from military service or attaining scholarships. It's criticized by professional organizations such as the National Association of School Psychologists because of the emotional harm it does to a child for being expelled. It's related to negative consequences such as increased dropping out rates and the discriminatory application, again, like I said, as far as minority students and low SES students. There is no distinction between punishment and discipline. The purpose of schools is to educate students, to discipline those who need it, not to just kick them out, and it should not be used for just troubled students to get them out of the way so the other students can learn, which is sometimes how it is applied. We also tend to criminalize when we call the courts and the police to handle a child's discipline. We criminalize that childish behavior where they don't have the mental or the cognitive development to know right from wrong. We've criminalized this childish behavior when we involve police in the school, and we create a permanent record for them that damages them for life. It is a big problem with students with disabilities. It has a bigger negative impact for them. The inconsistent application, where it's not used exclusively for serious behaviors, but sometimes inappropriate ways, such as the kindergarten student with the plastic axe or the girls using Midol, makes it lose credibility in the eyes of the media and in the public's eyes. It increases the rate of suspensions and expulsions, and there's a high rate of repeat. Once children tend to believe that they are a troublemaker, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Educational leaders need to be very careful in applying zero tolerance policies because we are charged with promoting the success of all students, the low SES, the minority students, the children with handicaps and disabilities. We need to promote the success of all students by advocating and nurturing them and the school culture, make it conducive to learning. Being proactive instead of being reactive with discipline will help achieve the ISSLC standard number 3. We are to promote the success of every student by managing this organization, by being proactive. We need to create a safe and effective learning environment. This will help promote the welfare and the safety of all the students and the staff. One of the problems with zero tolerance policy is the way that it is written at the local level, which does not allow the local administration to have any leeway in how it's applied. So to meet ISSLC standard number 4, the educational leaders need to promote this success. They need to collaborate with other faculty and community leaders. What would you like us to do? How would you like us to respond to various incidences? If we collaborate with them and involve them, it will help the students and the school work more effectively to promote all students. Zero tolerance policy also should be used only if you're going to use it fairly and ethically, not just to get rid of students who you consider troublemakers as a leader or as a teacher. It needs to provide democracy for these students and an equal playing ground for them. This will meet ISSLC standard number 5, promoting the success of every student by acting with integrity and fairness in an ethical manner to safeguard the values of democracy and equity and diversity. We need to also consider the moral and legal consequences of our decisions to promote the social justice. We don't want to be one of those court cases. We want to make sure we follow the due process for each student, give them their rights, their due, and help them attain success. References include the American Psychological Association, USA Today, Education Law Center, Federal Mandates of Control, Free Dictionary, the Post-Gazette, Consortium to Prevent School Violence, Connections, the Rutherford Institute, National School Safety and Security Services, and Lou Rockwell, Zero Tolerance Policies, and Political Correctness Replaces Common Sense.